Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar. April 14th, 2015, we're going to talk about sponsor paperwork made easy, hopefully easy, at least easier. That's the goal, to make it as simple as possible for you to get into the online system. Today, we're going to walk through some of the different steps involved. For some of you, this will be old hat, things you've done before. For some of you, it may be completely new. So we hope there will be something for everyone today. Just a reminder about using your webinar technology. You should see a panel very similar to the one on the screen right now. You can open or hide the side panel. If you have a question, you can raise your hand. Very specifically, we are encouraging people during the webinar to type in their questions. We know there may be a lot of questions around. Oh, yes. A lot of people will be having questions potentially around the how the online system works, some kinds of paperwork things. So if you have questions about that, please feel free to write those in. And Nancy and I will access those during the course of the webinar, and we'll be able to help you get those questions answered before you get off today. If you have troubles connecting, once again, you can also ask questions there or hang up and redial. If all else fails, please feel free to call Jonathan Harris, my colleague here at Hunger-Free Vermont. He or Tony can help you. The number is 865-0255. So lots of different ways to connect with us today, and we look forward to hearing from you. So who we are, those of you who have been listening week in and week out, you know by now. It's Nancy Lewis, Child Nutrition Consultant with the Vermont Agency of Education. Nancy, thanks for joining.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, and this is pretty old. This is old hat now. This is our fourth one. And then my name's Derek Lambert, Child Nutrition Initiatives Manager at Hunger-Free Vermont. Just as a disclaimer, if you have questions about this or any other aspects of the Summer Food Service Program, please make use of these ways of contacting us, email and or phone. I'll be sending out this PowerPoint presentation to everyone that's registered today, so feel free to reach out to us with any questions. So our objectives today are to learn to use the Summer Food Service Program Planning Toolkit to help with administrative tasks. I actually sent this out as an attachment about half an hour ago to each of you who are registered. So if you would like to access that document, feel free to check into your email. You can pull it up and have a look alongside today's webinar. We want to review the basics for submitting the intent to participate, password request, and W-9 forms. The deadline for that is tomorrow, Nancy. So this is a very timely subject. We want to walk through the details for completing the online sponsor agreement and the site agreements. And then we want to review budget, eligibility, and checklist items to complete before submitting your application. So I saw we had Marie earlier that said she could hear us. Just as an exercise, would everyone that can hear us clearly please raise your hand? Click to raise your hand on the webinar using the panel. Want to make sure everyone can hear us there. All right. Seeing lots of hands. Okay. Yay. Thank you. You can put them back down. Thank you so much. The reason we're doing this is there was one webinar where not everyone was hearing us, so we appreciate you helping us with that. So as we mentioned, we are really encouraging people this year, as in years past, to use the tools at their disposal to effectively plan for their summer meal programs. Hunger-Free Vermont, in partnership with the Agency of Education, has put together a summer meal planning toolkit to facilitate planning. One of the great tools in this document that I would really lead people toward is there's a series of budget planning worksheets that can be really helpful to folks, Nancy, as they're trying to plan their budget. We know the budget is really important, and what this allows you to do is to estimate your associated meal costs and program costs and to compare those to the reimbursement. And, you know, Nancy, we want this program to work for folks, and we also want them to know how it's going to play out over the course of the summer. So can you speak to the importance of a document like this to help people get a handle on their program early on?
Well, I suspect folks already have seen how important it is because a lot of people have either board members or superintendents or other folks who want to know, gee, if you take this on, what's it going to cost us? So having the budget worksheet is going to allow you to project that forward. And, of course, another thing that happens when you play out those numbers is you start to see as you scale out maybe the difference between flexible reimbursement, more meals served versus your fixed costs, and how as you serve more meals, the program becomes stronger. So when we go out and review this year, we're going to try to take a look at some of those projections and how they played out in prior years, and maybe think a little more about this budgeting process. But certainly the bottom line seems to be the question that everybody has, what's this going to cost us? Can we do it? Is it viable?
Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, the goal of this is to really help folks arrive and quantify some of what that looks like. In some cases, and hopefully in many cases, you'll find that the reimbursement covers the cost of the program. If you find that it doesn't, and there may need to be other funds, then hopefully this tool will give you time to identify that and to make a plan to move forward. So once again, all of you have received an email that includes this document. Would encourage folks to make use of it. And again, if it's not clear or you have some questions about how to make this most useful for your program, don't hesitate to write or to call, and we can help walk you through that. So here we are, April 14th. The intent to participate is a document that all sponsors, either new or returning, need to turn in. And it's a very basic document, Nancy. It just has information about the sponsor, the type of sponsor they are with the tax ID number. Most of our sponsors already have this information readily available. And it also to provide some information about site information. Something that's important to note here is that this is not a binding document. This is a document that is, you're notifying the agency that you intend to operate the program. If you're an existing sponsor, then all you need to do is click into that returning sponsor statement of intent. If you're a new sponsor, there is a statement of intent form. There is a password request form where you signify who your authorized users and signers are. There's a document that provides proof of nonprofit status and a W-9 form. I'll show everyone where that lives on the Vermont Agency of Education's website in just a moment. I'd like to note that these documents can be filled out and submitted to Nancy Lewis by email. That's probably the fastest way to fill it out and to turn it in. And if there are any issues filling those documents out, please let us know. I know Nancy is wanting to say something here. Is there any other things you would add in terms of this first deadline, Nancy?
Well, I wanted to say why the deadline is important to us, because ultimately the USDA has deadlines for setting up new agreements with sponsors, and that's June 1st. And sometimes it takes a little bit of time to work out who is the sponsoring organization and getting you set up in our system. I know there's been some confusion. Not every single site needs to send in one of these. It's really the sponsoring organization. So if you're just a site, have your sponsor send in the form so we can begin the conversation with them. We're also missing in this list, and I need to update our forms, and as we've gotten new sponsors this year, I've been reminded that we also need DUNS numbers. Mm-hmm. So that, don't get scared, it's a fairly easy process. We don't have the form on the website yet, but when I get a new sponsor request, I will send that form to you, and that's just another piece that our accounting area requires before they are willing to set you up to get money from the state of Vermont. So this, like Derek said, is not, it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. It's really the beginning of a conversation. We know you don't know all the information about your site, but at least let us know that you want to be a sponsor this year so we can begin working with you. These are ultimately, well, at least right now, going to Karen Abbott on our team. She's helping me organize all of the intent and folks, the communications with folks and the different forms that are coming in. So Karen Abbott is also a team member for this process.
And I'd like to, and just, Nancy was mentioning the DUNS number, which is something that could be an additional step for new sponsors. I'd like to note that that does not cost anything, and it only takes 5 to 10 minutes to get a DUNS number on the phone. So this is not a time-consuming process at this stage. Once again, all of that can be submitted by email. One thing that is a regular question, especially for our new and returning sponsors, is when I'm filling out the password request form, what does the signer do and what does the user do? And so as you can see here, there's a copy of the password verification and request form. I would like to note that if you are a returning sponsor and this information has changed, then you can use this form to remove authorized signers and users. And if you are a new a new or returning sponsor, you can also add authorized signers and users on this document. So this is a one-stop shop to either create a new password, create a new account on the online system, or to change information about who is accessing that online account. So an authorized signer has access to the online system, and very significantly, they have the authority to sign and submit applications, agreements, and claims for reimbursement. So, Nancy, it seems like the signer kind of has the last word from a sponsorship perspective on the information that's being submitted. The authorized user is someone who has access to the system and can complete applications, agreements, and claims for reimbursement. So they can upload information onto the agreement, but they're not the ones who sign it off.
Right.
Any advice you would give folks as they're thinking about who to put in each category?
Well, sometimes there are people that are working in your kitchens that you want to view the online agreement, or maybe you have somebody that you want to enter claims information monthly, but you don't want them to actually do the final submission. Those would be appropriate authorized users. Most of the people we give authority to are the signers, the ones that can submit the application and submit claims. If you have any questions, give me a call. We do even have more granular, meaning I could give even less authority to folks. So we have some abilities in the system to really tailor users. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is when I get one of these forms, there are sometimes two scenarios that end up being confusing. One is that the person's already in the system, but they don't remember their password. So you just need to let me know to reset the password. The other is I send the new password or the new online user and password information to the person who is listed as the new user. So not to the person that's sending the form, because passwords are secure. It should be protected and kept with just the person that's signing on. People can go in and change their passwords once they get into the system. And so I don't send these forms out to everybody, that's listed on the form. I send them directly to the user, and sometimes there's issues with emails, or folks don't check their email and don't know they get it. So I'm just clarifying that's how the communication works, and of course I can help you work through any glitches in that process.
One thing that's come up in some of the conversations I've had with sponsors, Nancy, is that, thinking about who your signers and your users are and what different people will be responsible for, this is a great opportunity to think about delegating. Figuring out, who or which different people within the sponsorship structure can be adding information, can be submitting information for claims. So would you say that, as a signer, this is a good opportunity to think about who can I work with, who can work with me to make sure we're getting this information, onto the system to then make it a bit easier to submit at the end of the month?
Yeah, so it's reminding me of how I sometimes think in the school food world that kitchen people with their creative cooking aren't always the most organized, well, I shouldn't say it that way, sorry, aren't the linear thinkers that might do filing and claiming. So it's better, I think, to have a team. It's good to have backup anyways for what you're doing in case somebody needs help, but it's good to form a team, and maybe there's somebody else, if you're the cook or in the office or whatever, that this would be a really simple thing for them to do versus, a little bit of a stretch. And I know people have or don't have technology available in their kitchens. So there's different ways to think about teaming up and using the best strengths of people and the resources that you have and people's time. So that's a way to think about this as you're figuring out who's going to have access to your agreement in the online system, the agreement and the claims.
That's great. Thank you, Nancy. And then a couple of the other forms, the nonprofit and W-9 forms, I'd like to note that if you are a school-based sponsor, well, as a returning sponsor, these are not documents that you have to turn in. And even if you're a new school-based sponsor, these documents are not required. However, for new private nonprofit sponsors, you will need to turn these in. This is basically on the left-hand side, the nonprofit sponsors. It's required for all the new nonprofit sponsors, with the exception of churches. And you basically attach a copy of your documentation for your tax-exempt status under the IRS code. And then on the W-9, it's required for sponsoring organizations, again, and not for an individual. So I would just encourage people who are, an organization that's sponsoring this. The W-9 is not for your personal information. It's for your organization. So once again, April 15th is the deadline that's the most relevant for these. If you're a school-based sponsor, significantly, these two forms do not apply. apply to you. Go ahead.
And so what Derek's referring to is you could already be set up, even though you're a new sponsor for this particular program, you could already be set up as a organization in our online system for another program like the Child and Adult Care Food Program or the National School Lunch Program. So in that case, you wouldn't be new to us, you would be just new to the particular summer food service program.
Mm-hmm. So what I'm hearing is if I'm already running a child nutrition program, then the agency actually already has this information.
Right.
And if this is new to me, the whole child nutrition world, then I'll need to send some of this documentation.
Yeah. Well, you need to at least send in the statement of intent because there are some behind-the-scenes things that we do to make a particular organization then have SFSP on the menu or for particular users to have access to that part of the system. So we do need to know it's new so we can do that initial behind-the-scenes stuff.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. So next I would like to show folks how we're going to get into some of the different things. First off, I just want to show you how easy it is to find the documentation that I need to get started in the summer food program. If you go to Google and you type in Vermont summer food, as we can see, the very first thing that comes up, the very first line, is where I can find all the documents and the access to the online system that I need. As you can see here, everyone, this brings you to the Vermont Agency of Education Summer Food Programs landing page, and Nancy and her staff have organized this very well. Lots of memos, trainings, best practices, mobile feeding resources, all of that's available at the top. And all of the documents that we just mentioned are available right here under the SFSP intent to participate with the corresponding deadline. If you're an existing sponsor, then this document is the only one that you need to fill out and return. You can click on it. Let me show you how this works. If you click on that, it brings up the document, it downloads it, and then I can bring it up very easily here, and I can fill it out and email it straight to Nancy, and I'm good to go. That's my April 15th deadline.
Well, you probably need to save it on your computer first,
true.
right,
That's a good
and then
point.
attach it. Yeah.
So that document is there. If you're a new sponsor, again, some of the documents we mentioned are here for download, to fill out, and again, to turn in. So now, maybe we can check. Do we have any questions that have come in, Nancy?
No, I don't have any questions, but now would be a great time for somebody to write a question.
Yeah, also, you know what, I'm going to unmute the lines for a moment. So we're going to get into the sponsor agreement here in just a moment, but seeing as the April 15th deadline is upon us, I want to make sure that everyone who has a question is able to ask one. So give me about 5 seconds, and I'm going to have everyone unmuted. Okay, so have almost everyone, like everyone's unmuted now. Are there any questions that have not been addressed yet about the statement of and the deadline around April 15th? Any questions out there? Okay, we're asking about the statement of intent and the April 15th deadline. Everyone clear so far?
You can just speak.
Right.
I notice some people are doing whatever that little triangle thing is, but yeah, you can just.
So we've unmuted the line. If anyone has any questions? Okay, so I guess we'll take that to mean that we've been very clear. I hope we have been. I'm going to mute the lines again temporarily. We'll come back for questions in a minute. Next, I want to really get into the nitty-gritty of the online agreement. So as you can see, the Summer Food Service Program Agreement has kind of two deadlines depending on your position. You actually can request advanced payments for your first month's reimbursement based on projected totals for the first month of service in the program. If you would like to do that, you would need to finalize your sponsor agreements by May 15th, 2015. This is especially helpful for people who really need to access funding for the program before it begins. If you do not need to access advance payments, then you will have until June 1st to finalize the sponsor agreement as well. And so the sponsor agreement is something that that is done online. And here, Nancy has a link that says Online Agreements, and you click on that, and it brings you here. It brings you to the Child Nutrition Program, and there's a login button. And for those of you who are returning sponsors, you may already have your sign-in information. And for those of you who are new sponsors, you'll receive your login information once you've filled out that password request form. So it brings you here, and you can enter your username. We're going to use a test account today, and it brings up your personalized information. It says test up here. If you were, for example, Addison Central Supervisory Union, it would say Addison Central Supervisory Union right there. And so where you want to go at this point is you need to go over to your applications, and this is going to allow you to see how to move forward. Yes, go ahead, Nancy.
So I just want to clarify, for those of you who are going to administer multiple NSLPs, so if you notice over to the right of the screen, I don't know, I can't tell, let me hide this. Over to the right, you should be able to see, hopefully, say notes there, just so I can unhide. Okay. I want them to be able to see the little menu bar to the right. And for this particular user, this person only has SFSP, but some of you may be getting authorization to add SFSP onto NSLP, in which case you may default into NSLP and have to click on SFSP. So I just want to note that, and I want to note something about the program year, too. Do you get into that later on, or do you want me to make a note now about how there are different programs for the buckets of money, NSLP versus SFSP? There are two different fiscal years. So when you log in, if you have NSLP connected to your username, when you log in after July 1st, the program year is going to show up as 2015 to 2016 because July 1st rolls over to a new fiscal year. Not so for a summer food service program. The new fiscal year is in October. So in July, when you start claiming, if you have both NSLP, SFSP attached, highlighted on your menu here, you are going to need to change your program year back to this 2014, 2015. This is the right year that you're seeing in this display for this year's summer food service program.
So summer food service program 2014, 2015, that will work all summer long. Great. So here we are, test user. Once again, whatever sponsor you are, it would normally read right up here at the top. And so you click over on applications, and here we are. And we have a place where it says agreements, and we want to go in here, and we're going to need to fill out our agreements. So we can come over here where it says SFA agreement, and we're going to click on new application. Excuse me, I've got my technology here in the way. Click on new application, and actually, Nancy, if I'm a returning sponsor, a lot of this information is going to come up automatically,
That's
right?
That's right.
This information is blank here because it's registered as a new user, but for
a new organization.
But for those of you who have operated the summer food service program in the past, most of this will auto-populate. And so what you'll want to do is simply make sure that it's accurate. And if there have been changes, you'll want to update that. For example, if your office has moved, the street address is different, or if there are differences in who's administering the program.
And when Derek scrolls to the bottom, you'll also see there's a certification statement and a place that you put the date in, and we're really looking for a certification for this year, too. That would be something that the USDA audits us on. So at the very bottom of this, before you click Save, so can you see your scroll bar to the right? Oh, Derek's got this little window. Okay,
Going down.
keep up with him. Yeah, I want all the way at the bottom. See where there's a certifying signature and a date. So the certifying signature, if you are an authorized user, your name will show up on that drop-down. Only authorized users, authorized signers, not the users, show up on that list. So the date really wants to be at this level, and this is for the overall sponsoring organization, wants to be a 2015 date. So what happens, and why I bring that up, is it will carry over last year's date from year to year.
So one thing I want to notice here, we'll get into the details of this agreement. We have time to get through that, and we'll look into the side agreements. But I'd like to just note, especially for those of you who may be new to this process, is that you only fill out one sponsor agreement. This agreement that you're working on here, you're only going to fill this page out one time. The side agreements, which we'll see next, there's one side agreement for every meal site location. So What we're looking at now is only going to get filled out once, and then you'll go back and add individual site information afterwards. So let's get started here. Again, you include the mailing address, where you intend to receive mail associated with the program, the physical address for the location where the program will be operated from. For many of you, it may be the SU offices, or it may be the headquarters for your private nonprofit. And then we have a few different people that you want to think about. And this is, again, a good opportunity to think about how you'll delegate tasks in the summer meal program. Who will administer the program? That's the person who will be in charge of the paperwork and for filing the claims, for gathering the information associated with the program. Who is going to direct the summer food service program? Who will be your contact person? That may be the same as the sponsor administrator. If so, you can click right there and it will auto-populate. If it's a different person, you'll just enter that information. You'll want to know and think about who your finance and claim contact are, who the food service contact is, who's preparing the meals for the program, and then also who will be monitoring the different sites. So once again, these are not in any way required to be the same people. In some cases, especially for small programs, it may be the same person, and so you can just click there. And then you want to indicate the type of the sponsor that you're going to have. Most of the folks that we work with will be either a public or private nonprofit school food authority, or a public or private summer camp. Some of you may fall under some of these other categories. Nancy, I believe the top two will be most of the.
Yeah, most of them are school food authorities. I would say probably the next most common would be the nonprofit organization, then down to residential camps, and I'm thinking we have one unit of local city Winsky, so that's rarely used that way.
Right. So if you have any questions, it's pretty straightforward, but if you have any questions, let us know. If you're a new sponsor, please just indicate it there. That's for the state agencies to know and to help with some of their oversight and monitoring responsibilities. If you do run any of the other child nutrition programs, this is the time, A29, to indicate that. This will feed directly into some of the monitoring and the requirements and some of the information that you'll be providing. Essentially, as you're filling out these agreements, there is a checklist of forms to fill in that are going to be auto-populated. So the answers that you give here, you want to make sure they're as accurate as possible so that you're then cued to provide the relevant materials, the relevant supporting documents for your program, which we'll get to later on. But this agreement feeds directly into that. Go ahead. So
the new sponsor check is reminding me, and maybe this will help you think about this and why accuracy might be important. Behind the scenes in this is a database, and we run queries on it. And one of the things that we do is we check and find out information about when your sites are running in days, and we extract the data and send it to USDA so they can populate a website about letting folks all over the country know where they can go to get free summer meals. So there's this behind-the-scenes data. We can, extract things like new sponsor, whatever, just to help us hone in from the whole world of information that is here, all the different sponsors, to highlight and recognize certain things going on, like who's operating in June and who's operating breakfast. And so behind the scenes, we do have a data store that we query against.
That's great. And Nancy, can you talk about A30 and A31 about the sponsoring organization providing ongoing year-round service, and also if the serious deficiency? I know that's not something we've encountered very often in Vermont, but can you just provide some insight for folks on how to answer these questions?
So a lot of what you see embedded in these in this online agreement, which you may find if you have experience with NSLP, the school lunch program, is very detailed. And the reason is it's almost like we're starting with new administration every year in a fairly short time frame. So summer runs just for a few months. And yet USDA requires us to approve all of your operations. So in order to do that, we're asking detailed questions so we can give you a thumbs up or thumbs down that, yes, you know the rules, you're good to go, you can do what you're doing, you're set up. Follows the rules. You're going to find that there are some rules embedded in here. You might get red errors if you answer the question wrong. And so this 830 is one of those rules that you have to be a not-for-profit and provide year-round ongoing activities to be a sponsor of the program. The 831, I've never had anybody check that because I don't know that we've ever found someone to be in serious deficiency. There is I believe, a link on our website that talks about serious deficiency. That would be a real red flag to say, are we going to let these folks operate this year? They didn't do such a good job last year. This is, this would be asking this person who's signing at the bottom saying, yes, everything I'm saying is true here, to be honest and say, yes, we've been serious deficient. So it would just highlight that maybe we want to have an extra conversation with this organization.
So, but what I understand from your explanation of that is if you haven't had a very explicit conversation with the agency about that, then
it's a no.
It's a no.
It's a no.
Great.
And we do go through this. So our job on our end is to review all of your answers and decide to go ahead and approve or to ask you to change something or to ask you to clarify. So we do go through this, every answer, and make sure it looks, like what we're expecting or whatever.
And just to be clear, if there's a problem, it's not about folks getting in trouble. It's about trying to help them understand how to address those questions, how to address those concerns. I understand the agency provides support if folks are having questions about
It's
that.
really about communication. This is to facilitate communication. You hear me talking really fast. This is the time of year right now where we're trying to get everybody into the system, provide all the technical support for people to figure out, do they want to run a program? There's a lot happening getting ready for summer food. So this is a tool for communicating with us and just helps us administer.
So for Section B, once again, I'd like to notice we're talking about sponsor agreement here. So the estimated number of sites to be operated, that's how many sites you anticipate serving. B2 is an important thing. The planned number of operating days with children present. This, you want to be thinking globally about all the sites that you operate. So if, for example, one of your sites starts in June and ends in July, and then the other one starts in July and goes through August, you would want to account for all of the days in each month that any site is operating in your program. So remember, in the sponsor agreement, if we're asking about program operations, this is operations across all of your sites. For the estimated daily total meals, again, this is for all of your sites. And we encourage people to estimate on the higher end because that avoids having any issues. Essentially, if you put a very low number in this document and then you try to claim later on a number that's above that, then you would actually have to go in and modify this agreement. So we encourage people to estimate on the high end. That way, once it comes time for claiming, everything can go through smoothly. Same thing with the planned dates of operation. You want to make sure that the beginning date is the earliest date of operation for any of your sites and that the ending date is the last day of operation for the site that runs the longest.
So not only do claims bump up against this, but also the individual site agreements. So if you initially think all of your sites, none of the sites are going to run in June, and then later you go in and you change a site agreement to say something's operating in June, you need to come up and also, and I say up because it's higher, it comes first, and it's also an umbrella organization. You need to come and say and change the School Food Authority agreement to also reflect changes that are happening to the site. So at some point, I think I'm going to have Derek click a save button so that you can see there are red messages that come up at the bottom when something is not correct under the system.
Great, we'll do that. And B5, if you are a self-prep entity, if you're providing your own meals, then you would click no on this. If you're working with a vendor or a food service management company, you would click yes and provide the name of the company or organization that you're working with. Section C, again, you do have the option of requesting advance payment for your first month's reimbursement. So if that is something you'd like to do, be sure to click yes. And then you have to click on C2 that you understand that those reimbursements come out of your first month's payment. Again, if you do intend, I'll just repeat again, if you'd like to request an advance payment, Nancy and the agency have that May 15th deadline for submitting the sponsor agreement. If you don't want advance payment, just click no on C1.
So Karen Abbott, as she gets agreements in, is sending emails out to folks and in them asking, as she gets your intent, she's asking you to please let us know if you want advances or want USDA foods, otherwise known or used to be known as commodities. So even outside this agreement, we're trying to collect that information early on so that we can work with you and make sure that we meet your request. So you also need to send me an email, Nancy, if you want either that, what was the first one, C1 or D1.
Right. And so the request for commodities, especially for schools, we encourage folks to go ahead and say that yes, they would request commodities, because then that feeds into your yearly count for USDA commodities, as I understand it. So if you just click that yes, then you're able to tap into that 1.5 cents per meal that you receive through the Summer Food Service Program.
And Derek, I can tell we just need more time for this. So I'm sorry I keep jumping in, but I keep thinking of things that have come up in the past for people. This one around choosing whether or not you have USDA food. There were years where you couldn't pick them up. You can pick them up at the warehouse this year. So that's an ethic. So that might be a consideration for people when they're deciding. You're allowed to pick it up because there are fees for deliveries and storage.
Right. And so I know that the agency has been providing some support around civil rights assurance this year. E1, you definitely need to, and there's the expectation that you do provide services to all persons without regard to race, color, national origin, gender, age, or disability. So in E1, that is something that you need to click yes to. There doesn't need to be any discrimination in the program. Nancy, I know that you've worked with Dan Lynch over at the State Agency of Education. Are there any specific things that you would like to mention about civil rights here? Specifically, I know there are some questions E2, E3, E4, and E5. I think some people also want to understand what information they need to be providing about civil rights and the different ethnicities, ethnicity and race that are served by their programs, and then also the information that the state agency provides. Can you provide some insight around that?
Sure. So Dan is a new person on our team, and he's been charged with developing test presentation for civil rights. So the USDA is giving more emphasis to civil rights. We have a webinar, not a webinar. We have a PowerPoint that we can send you if you'd like to show that to your staff. Dan did some trainings in our April 2nd conference. So we do have and will be developing more civil rights materials. There are some bottom line things that you shouldn't do around discrimination, learning about protected classes, and letting people know how they can file a complaint. So those are some basic things that are part of that training. In regards to ethnicity, you can, the question really needs to come out of this E5, needs to come out of the agreement, because if you're an open site, you're not going to know early on who shows up. At the same time, it's built in and you've got to put something in there. So take a best guess for E5. I'm going to fill in the state agency one based on county data. So the USDA will be getting its required information about ethnicity and race for your site. So don't get hung up on E5. Put something in. Put your best guess. We're not really going to do anything with that data.
And then you're going to fill in some of the county-wide data within some of the agreements. Now,
so,
can you help
Go
ahead.
Can I tell you that we have a question from somebody that might be useful for everybody. Somebody has to step away from their computer and wants to know who should fill out this form. Who should fill out this form?
The sponsor agreement form.
Yeah.
I think if you are the administrator of the program, you want to be working with your staff, the people who may be involved in different portions of it. You definitely want to have a conversation with the folks who will be serving the meals, the different sites you'll be working with, to get information about the dates that they'll be operating. But really, this should be someone who is going to be administering the program, who is going to be familiar with the different aspects of the operation, when it will be taking place, where meals will be served, and then can also speak to some of these questions to make sure that as the program operates, it will be in compliance with some of the different things that are expected.
Right.
So I would say the administrator of the program.
Right, and the state is not, or the USDA isn't saying who that person needs to be. So that's a decision that you make within your sponsoring organization about who wants to take on this job.
And if you are just a site, if you're someone who is not a sponsor, you're just receiving meals, then actually you will not be responsible for this part of the document.
Unless it's delegated.
That's true, yeah. But generally speaking, if you are working with, for example, I'm thinking of a supervisory union that may provide meals to 10 or 12 sites, and you were just receiving meals at your location, then this is probably something you won't be responsible for. Yeah, and so I'm looking at Mandy. This is something that George Mackey will be working on. and providing. So for you, this is not something that will be necessary. Nancy, in terms of civil rights assurance, it sounds like maybe we can send out that PowerPoint to give folks some guidance about some of the
why don't I send that to you?
Yeah, that's great.
You can send it with the after material.
That sounds great. So we'll trust that PowerPoint provides a lot of good information about this section, and that'll allow us to move on a little faster. Great. So in Section F, you want to talk about your plan for program promotion. As you know, if you are operating an open summer meal site, then you need to let folks in the community know that these meals will be available for folks to drop in and participate. You have 4 options here for listing news media outlets and the date that you will send your publication. Now, do I have to send it to 4 different places, Nancy, or no?
No,
that's
you have to send it to one.
Exactly.
One. But it is a requirement that you do this, and that's why it's in here, why we're asking.
Great. And so in Section G, you have a plan for training. Many of you actually have already received sponsor training. If you attended the April 2nd CACFP SFSP training in Montpelier at the Capitol Plaza, then you'll want to list the name of the person in the SU or the sponsorship. You'll want to name someone associated with your sponsorship who attended that training. You can just put SFSP spring training, and the date was April 2nd. That will satisfy the sponsor training requirement you have for this year. If you didn't attend that training, then you'll want to reach out to Nancy Lewis, the State Agency of Education, so that she can organize a one-on-one training with you. In G2, this is where you will list who else is being trained. So the person who attended the training on April 2nd or who will attend another training directly with Nancy will need to make sure that folks that are associated with the admin and finance side, food service, site supervisors, all of those folks will need to understand how the program works, what their responsibilities are, and how to make sure that they're running the program in a way that allows them to serve meals, to receive reimbursement, to satisfy the requirements that the AOE has and the USDA. If you attended the April 2nd training, really that's just passing along a lot of the good information that you've already received. So in some cases, you may be the admin or finance person, so you would just click on "I'm the same as the SFSP administrator," and then if you're training food service, you're training your site supervisors, all you need to do here is you need to click who, you need to write down who was the name of the trainer, and then you need to have the date of the training. So, Nancy, I would encourage people to try to do all of these trainings at the same time if possible. Just, in the interest of time, try to gather everyone that needs to know, everyone who is responsible for a different portion of the program, get them together, go over the training together, and then that way you can move on and satisfy this requirement. Something we've done is that we have shared through the Summer Food Program listserv and also through the list of folks who attended the training on April 2nd, all of those folks have received a sample PowerPoint training to share with their site staff and their food service and their admin and finance staff. There's a PowerPoint that you can walk through that will satisfy those training requirements. So we encourage people to use that. And if there are any other individual questions that come from your staff, that's a good time to have that conversation. But we definitely want to have people trained as the program is getting started.
So there is a checklist item that generates, so we're kind of jumping ahead. And there is a form on that the unsecured website where Derek had Google searched Vermont summer food. There's a training plan. And within that document, after you scroll through the first page that you would fill in and submit to us, there is a list of roles and what information they need to be trained on, and that may help you develop your training plan.
Great. Wonderful. And then once we have figured out who the trainers are, once the training, once you've set the date for that, then you need to certify that everything you said in here is true, that you have everything you provided is accurate and can be used in approving the program. You want to click on that you certify. As Nancy mentioned, in this list, you're going to have a list of people who are authorized signers. You'll pick that person who is providing the certifying signature, give the date, and then you hit Save. Now, I'm going to click Save, and actually, because I haven't entered anything, you're going to see a whole lot of red text. That's just because I haven't put anything in there. For those of you who will have filled this out, if everything is in there and there's no issue, then you'll actually have an option to submit that. And if there is an issue or if something needs to be changed, you'll see 1 or 2 or 3 or however many little red texts. And the good thing about those, Nancy, is they tell you where there needs to be a change and what change needs to be made.
Yeah,
so.
But it's still confusing. So we do get calls on the red errors. So do your best, if you do have one, to figure out what is it saying. Now, you're never going to see such a list as this. So this is just an example. Don't get scared. You'll notice to the right the inactive status. That will also show up when we go back out to the higher level menu where you can either click on the sponsor agreement or the site agreement. That status inactive indicates there is an error on your agreement.
And so I'd like to note here, if you see what a mistake is and you realize it's something very simple, it was just an oversight, you can click on the Edit application. If you don't know what that is, maybe you're going to call Nancy, maybe you're going to call me, but you just want to leave it where it is for now, you can hit Finish, and that takes you back out to the main page. I'd like to note that every time you make an adjustment to your sponsor application, please don't forget to click Save. That way you maintain the information that you had.
And also for later on in the year, if you come in after we've approved the agreement and you make a change, it's going to take it out of approval status. You need to have an approved status to be able to file a claim. So that's just a note for later on for those of you who may be adding sites or doing other things. Another reason why you might want to do this exercise where Derek just went in and created a bunch of errors is you don't get to see the Add Site Application link until you've actually saved the SFA agreement. And that's a question we get year after year. Where are all my sites? So you need to have gone through that first step of saving the SFA agreement, and then the Add Site Application will become live as a link. And behind the scenes, behind that link are all the sites that you've told us you're going to operate. If you don't see a site listed, let us know, because we need to add them in. It's sort of a behind-the-scenes steps that we work from your statement of intent, and it may be that you have a new site that wasn't listed that we need to add. So don't panic. If you don't see your site from this Add Site Application link that Derek's going to show you in a minute, just let us know we need to add another site.
So as you can see, you can go back and review what you've done so far on your sponsor agreement. I can modify it, go in there and make more changes to then submit it. And so Nancy, if I operated 12 summer meal sites last year, you're telling me that once I reactivate my sponsor agreement, those sites are going to repopulate.
Yes, that's right. And they also, all the sites, if you're a school food authority running the National School Lunch Program, all of those are going to show up. So even more schools than maybe you thought you were going to offer summer food. So there is some relationship to the other meals programs on this link.
So I'm not going to have to go back and start from scratch on all of those. All of the past summer meal sites that will repopulate information about those.
It does not repopulate site information. It just keeps the name.
Ah, okay. I see. So now we're going to...
Maybe the new system someday will have that.
So as we can see, we have test site 1 here. We're adding a site application. I click Add Application. And remember, the sponsor agreement, you only fill out one sponsor agreement. And this is what we're at now is a site agreement, which is about a specific location where meals are being served. So this is the physical location for the meal site. The name of the site supervisor is the person who is responsible for the meal service on location. In A9 is this meal site located in the standard metropolitan statistical area. Nancy, everyone in Vermont says no. Is that correct?
Except for Burlington.
Except for Burlington. So unless you are in the city of Burlington, you'll hit no. And then, is this site new? That is, if this is the first year that that site will be operating. Section B, something that's different here is the sponsor agreement. You were listing the dates of operation in the beginning and end dates across all of your sites. For a site application, this is the operating days, the beginning and end dates for the specific site in question. So for example, if I am at the Berry City Pool and we are only operating 5 days in June and 20 days in July, that's all I put in. It's 5 for June and 20 for July. So it's specific to the site. You include the beginning and end date. You have your plan for sponsor monitoring. So for a new site, all 3 of these visits will occur, the pre-operational visit, the site visit, and the site review. For returning sites that operated without a problem, the site review is the only one that's required. Nancy, I know that this system needs something in every blank, so you said that you just need to add, if it's a site that's returning,
yeah.
put the same date.
It hasn't caught up with the USDA rule about this.
clear, for example, I'll keep the example of the Berry City Pool, which has operated for years and years. We can say that perhaps the sponsor, George, is going to do a site review on July 5th. He would actually put July 5th on all 3 of the dates, and he would put his name in each time for the monitor name. You indicate the days of the week that the meals are served and any additional operation information. I know a very common thing about additional information may be that the site is closed on July 4th. I know that's a very common thing. Also, there are field trip approval forms that can be very helpful for one-off field trips. However, if you know from the very beginning that every Friday you're going to be at the pool rather than at the camp where the program normally operates, this would be a great time to let the state agency know that every Friday potentially you're going to be serving breakfast at a different location. So if there's anything that's a regular change or something that you know at the very beginning of the program, this is a great time in B5 to indicate that. Is that helpful to you, Nancy?
Yes, but you do need to send in from that other website a form that tells me what you're doing, and then I need to approve it. That's something that the USDA requires. It's about operating at a different location than what we're approving you for in the agreement. So I just need to talk through with you to make sure kids are going to be served as you've advertised.
Great. So eligibility information, most of our sponsors operate, many of our sponsors operate as open summer meal sites, but as you can see here, you have 4 different options: open, closed enrolled, day camp, or residential camp. You can indicate the different ways that eligibility documentation will be determined. You can indicate that the school is 50% or more free or reduced the same year as operation. So for example, this past school year it was at 50%. If your eligibility is from a previous year, you can use the base year of eligibility. This would be relevant for a school or an area that was perhaps at 50% free and reduced in 2013 that is now at 46%. They're actually still eligible to continue operating. You just need to indicate that you use that eligibility from a previous year. Census block groups are another way to indicate that a site is open site eligible. And then again, on down, you have options to indicate how you are operating a closed enrolled or a day camp site. In the interest of time, I'm going to continue moving, but this is where you want to indicate the eligibility. If you have questions on this, please contact Nancy or myself, and we can help you here.
Yeah, it's a whole other webinar. There's so many things around eligibility. So yes, please call.
One of the things is that if you are, for some reason, gathering household income statements, we really encourage folks to use the income form that is provided on the website that we showed earlier, the summer SFSP SSO website. It really makes a lot more sense to use that document because you're sure to be in compliance with regulations and guidelines. You don't want to have a form that includes too much information or is not asking enough information. So please just go ahead and use those forms that are provided on the previous website that I mentioned here. So that is available as a resource. So in terms of non-pricing and pricing, most of all of the open sites are non-pricing because they're receiving meals for free. So that, as you can see, it's noticed on D1, it says all open and closed enrolled sites must operate under the following agreements. And then day camps and residential camps that do not charge separately for meals also must operate under this agreement. So basically, if all the meals are being provided for free, which should be the case in open and closed enrolled sites, you'll click on this first one. Providing meals to the site, you want to indicate meals that are being prepared by the sponsor, prepared by a contractor, if they're being, if the meals are being prepared on site or if they're being delivered. And then again, on site operations, you want to indicate what are the facilities present where the meals are being served. So this could be indoors, with or without tables, outdoors, with or without cover. And on F2, if there is no covering, you need to have some provision for meal service in the case of inclement weather. This could be perhaps you go inside a building on days of inclement weather. Another very common theme is that maybe you have a pop-up tent that is at your disposal that you can pop up and use as cover in the event of inclement weather. So this is very helpful to think about as well. Once again, we encourage people to use the meal count forms provided by child nutrition programs, again, to avoid any confusion. You can find those directly on the website that we saw before. You want to indicate how your daily meal count sheets will be collected. They need to be collected at least weekly. We encourage a lot of folks to do it daily if possible. One easy way to do that is if you're delivering meals to different sites with coolers, to just send those forms back each day. Finally, here in Section G, Sections G and H, Section G, you have your different meal types: breakfast, snack, lunch, and supper. The estimated number of eligible children and the estimated number of total children will be the same at all open and closed enrolled sites, because all children are eligible to receive reimbursement through the program. So we'd just like to note for those of you listening today, if you are an open or a closed enrolled site, this number will be the same as this number, and you do not need to fill out this part right here, the camps. The middle section is only for those that are operating camps through the Summer Food Service Program. And again, you want to indicate your start and your end time so that people know when the meals will be served. This is also information that you'll make available in your media release to the public. Will delivery of meals be no later than the approved start time for meal service? Obviously, Nancy, that needs to be the case. The meals need to be delivered on time. And then storage facilities, you want to make sure that you think through some of your storage facilities. You want to at the very least, make sure that if you're going to have meals there for any period of time, that you need to think about refrigerating the milk, or at least serving the meals in a prompt enough period so that the meals maintain temperature within whatever receptacle they're being delivered in. For milk or for cold lunches, this will be within coolers. For a hot meal, it may be in hot boxes, but you want to make sure that you address what those are. You want to describe your procedure for ordering meals and how adjustments will be made, and also to give some thought to managing excess meals. I know, Nancy, that's something, one way to really address that is to make sure you have an ongoing conversation with your site to make sure you're delivering the right amount of meals, whether it needs to be more or less, and then thinking about how you'll deal with that if there are excess meals. We know that under some, if food has been kept at a safe temperature, those meals can be donated. We also know if meals can be discarded, feel free to be creative with maybe it can be compost for a garden project. So there are different ways you can look at that. And I know we're moving very quickly, Nancy. Are there any thoughts you have about these site agreements as what we've shared here?
Only that there's so much. There's so many questions that people end up having that I wish we had more time to go over them. So if you have a scenario that doesn't seem to fit in here, remember, the reason we're asking these questions is there is some rule or regulation around that. So maybe you want to know what is the rule. When I do one-to-one trainings with new sponsors and we go through the agreement, I use these questions to explain what the USDA rules are. So it's an opportunity to have a conversation, and maybe there is some requirement or something that you want to know more about. So just don't hesitate to call or write.
And in conclusion, just to go quickly, would like to notice that here is a place where you can add in your operating and your administrative costs. This is something that allows you to estimate your costs and compare it to your operating reimbursement. If there is a shortfall in funding, this is an opportunity for you to think through and share with the agency the source of funds that you may use to make up the difference, and then you can save this document, and then you can go back to the main form. And then based on information that you've entered so far about your sponsor and your site agreement, there is eligibility documentation that auto-populates. So as you can see here, you can go into this, and your eligibility documentation, actually we didn't fill out any information here, so it doesn't have this, but information you may see here and that is listed on the PowerPoint I'll send out after this is information such as a letter to the Department of Health, a media release form, a menu planner. So whatever documents you need to have to fill out and to submit to the Agency of Education actually auto-populates here based on the answers you've given in your sponsor and your site agreement.
Okay, so let's clarify, Derek, because you're showing them the site eligibility documentation. That is different from the checklist. So the site eligibility documentation, one thing I can tell you that may be helpful, and there are, of course, forms on the website for you to submit that eligibility documentation. If you are an open site, and, well, if you're an open site, you don't need to send us any documentation because we will get that from Census, which we already have access to, or we'll get it from your school. We have the claim reports and different things. If you, when we go through reviewing your agreement, if you click open site and I can't find any reason for that low-income status, I would ask you anyway. So OpenSite, we're not looking for documentation. I'll fill out that part of the list for you. For the other close enrolls and camps, there are some rules about that, and we can talk about it at another time.
Thank you, Nancy, for that clarification. And then if you get onto the checklist, for example, once again, I'd like to remind you, this list auto-populates based on the answers that you give with your sponsor and site agreement. And then includes a letter to the Department of Health, media release, training documentation, and a one-week menu plan. I'd like to note, Nancy, that all of these documents are available for download on the Summer Meals website.
And any additional ones that show up. So there's there's a form about management and control of that certification of direct operational control. There's, if you are vending, there's the food service management. So there are additional things, but the four that you saw there that Derek was showing us are the basic four that everybody gets. And it's just for me to know that you're going through and doing that task that you're required to do.
And so while all potential checklist forms that may come up are available on the website, the ones that you'll need to submit are actually populated here based on your responses.
Right.
Great. And so then we hit back, and once again, all of this says inactive and unapproved because we haven't actually entered information. But as you enter information, you activate your agreement, and it is approved by the state. What ultimately happens is that you can hit submit for approval, and that actually gets you in the system ready to operate the program and to receive reimbursement for meals. Right. So I know we've covered a lot of ground today. It's gone really quickly. I think we did manage to cover a lot, and I'm sure we have a lot of questions. I would really just like to refer folks back to our contact information. Once again, Nancy Lewis at the Agency of Education, myself at Hunger Free Vermont. Feel free to reach out to us with any questions you might have. I'd also like to note that I'm going to send out a PowerPoint that provides a rough sketch of what we've discussed today. This webinar was recorded and will be available on YouTube. I'll send out the link to everyone who is registered, whether or not you were able to attend today. And once again, you've received the sponsor toolkit in your email to help with planning as well. So once again, too bad we had to move so quickly. I feel like that's always the case when we're talking about the sponsor paperwork. And again, make sure you join us next time when we're going to have our final webinar on May 13th at 2 p.m. We will answer, I will just go ahead and say, we'll answer any residual questions that may come up about sponsor agreements and site agreements. That'll still even be before that May 15th deadline. So if you have questions and you don't want to write, you don't want to call, at the very least, please do listen on May 13th and interrupt us with your questions. And then we'll move on to our primary topic, which will be about advertising and outreach and summer meals. So that's it for me. Nancy, any final thoughts from you?
Well, just sorry we were rushing and talking so fast. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing from you.
All right. Thanks, folks. Have a nice day.